67% of Americans are behind on retirement savings. Right now. Today. And the cruel joke? The solution was solved. Completely solved. Over 3,000 years ago. Carved into stone walls along the Nile River. Ancient Egyptian workers built a savings system so airtight it funded retirement, survived inflation, and even triggered the world's first recorded workers' strike over unpaid benefits. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what they did, and the 3 moves you can make this week to copy it. The year is 1170 BC, the reign of Pharaoh Ramesses III. Egypt is the wealthiest civilization on Earth, and it is fracturing from the inside. In the royal necropolis city of Deir el-Medina, on the west bank of the Nile near modern-day Luxor, an elite crew of craftsmen and laborers, known as the servants in the place of truth, have stopped working. These were not ordinary workers. They were the most skilled artisans in the ancient world. The men tasked with carving and painting the royal tombs of the pharaohs themselves. Their knowledge was so sensitive, so sacred, that they lived inside a sealed village, separated from the outside world. And on this particular morning in November of 1170 BC, they walked off the job. Not because of dangerous conditions, not because of cruelty. They stopped because the government had failed to deliver their rations, their grain payments, for the 2nd month in a row. This event, recorded on a papyrus now housed in the Egyptian Museum in Turin, Italy, is the world's first documented labor strike. And buried inside that story is a financial system so sophisticated, so structurally sound, that modern economists have spent decades studying it in awe. Because those grain rations? They were not just wages. They were a retirement fund, an inflation hedge, and a diversified asset portfolio. All in one. Let's break down exactly how the Egyptian financial system worked, and why it maps almost perfectly onto what your financial advisor is charging you 2% a year to explain. Principle 1. The Grain Bank. Egypt's original 401k. Egypt ran on grain. Wheat and barley were the foundational currency of the entire civilization. But here is the part Wall Street glosses over. Grain was not just spent, it was stored. State-run granaries called shenu functioned as deposit banks. Workers contributed a portion of their grain allotment, which was held collectively and redistributed during illness, old age, or family emergency. According to Egyptologist John Romer's research published in his 1984 work, Ancient Lives, Deir el-Medina workers received monthly rations of approximately 4.5 sacks of emmer wheat and 1.5 sacks of barley, enough to eat, trade, and save. The surplus was the key. Workers who managed their surplus well accumulated real, tangible, inflation-resistant wealth. Sound familiar? It should. That surplus contribution into a communal, appreciating store of value is the conceptual DNA of the modern 401k. Principle 2. Diversification across asset classes. The Egyptians did not keep everything in grain. Papyrus records from Deir el-Medina, and there are thousands of them, because these workers were extraordinarily literate, show a bustling internal economy. Workers traded in linen, copper tools, pottery, and even livestock. One surviving document, the Mayer Papyrus, records a woman named Aranofri purchasing a female slave for 4 bronze vessels, 10 linen garments, and miscellaneous household items. This is not extravagance. This is asset allocation. The Egyptians instinctively understood that holding wealth across multiple non-correlated asset types protected them if one category crashed. If the grain harvest failed, as it catastrophically did during the famines of the late New Kingdom, those who held copper and linen survived. This is the ancient world's version of not putting everything into a single stock. Principle 3. The concept of deferred compensation. Here is where it gets extraordinary. Senior craftsmen at Deir el-Medina received larger rations than junior workers, not just because of their current output, but as recognition of accumulated expertise and seniority. Foremen received nearly double the standard ration. This differential payment structure rewarded longevity and incentivized workers to stay, invest their skills, and build toward a larger future payout. That is deferred compensation. That is vesting schedules. That is your employer's 401k match that fully kicks in after 3 years of service. The Egyptians engineered this incentive structure 30 centuries before the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. Principle 4. Mutual aid networks as insurance. Beyond the granary system, workers at Deir el-Medina participated in informal mutual aid collectives. When a worker died, fell ill, or could not perform duties, the community, not the state, redistributed resources to cover the gap. Belgian Egyptologist Andrea McDowell documented in her 1999 study, Village Life in Ancient Egypt, that community members regularly loaned grain, tools, and goods to one another with recorded repayment expectations. This is peer-to-peer lending. This is termed life insurance. This is the cooperative credit union model, invented on the west bank of the Nile in 1200 BC. Principle 5. The strike as financial accountability. Return now to November 1170 BC. When those workers walked out of the necropolis and sat in protest in front of the mortuary temples shouting, "We are hungry and thirsty. We have no clothes, no oil, no fish, no vegetables," they were not just complaining. They were enforcing a contract. They understood that their labor had been prepaid with the promise of future rations, their deferred compensation, and that the government was in default. They won. The rations were delivered. The lesson: financial literacy means knowing when you are owed and being willing to demand it. So what does a 3,000-year-old grain bank in the Egyptian desert actually mean for your financial life in 2025? Everything. Here are 5 concrete moves you can make this week, directly inspired by what those workers figured out along the Nile. Action Step 1. Maximize your employer's 401k match. Today, the Egyptian foreman received double rations as deferred compensation for seniority. Your employer's 401k match is the closest modern equivalent. And according to Vanguard's 2023 How America Saves report, 28% of Americans with access to employer matching are leaving free money on the table by not contributing enough to capture it. If your employer matches up to 4% and you are only contributing 2%, you are doing exactly what the junior craftsmen did when they spent their full grain ration instead of saving the surplus. Log into your HR portal this week. Raise your contribution to at least capture the full match. That is an instant 100% return on those dollars before the market does a single thing. Action Step 2. Diversify like an Egyptian storeroom. The workers of Deir el-Medina held grain, copper, linen, and livestock, non-correlated assets. In 2025, the translation is simple. Do not hold only one asset class. If your entire retirement sits in company stock, a single sector ETF or cash, you are the Egyptian worker who stored everything in grain the year the Nile failed to flood. A basic 3-fund portfolio, a total U.S. market index fund, an international index fund, and a bond fund, mirrors that ancient diversification principle with modern S&P 500 exposure at rock-bottom expense ratios. Fidelity, Vanguard, and Schwab all offer versions of this for as low as 0.03% annually. Action Step 3. Build your mutual aid network. The Deir el-Medina community pooled resources because they understood that individual wealth is fragile and collective resilience is not. In practical 2025 terms, this means building a 6-month emergency fund, your personal grain store, so a job loss or medical event does not force you to liquidate investments at the worst possible time. A high-yield savings account currently paying 4 to 5% APY is your Shenu granary. Fund it before you optimize anything else. Action Step 4. Audit your financial contracts. Those workers struck because they knew exactly what they were owed. Do you know what fees your financial advisor or mutual fund charges? A 1% annual management fee on a $400,000 retirement account costs you $4,000 a year. Compounded over 20 years, that difference can exceed $200,000 in lost growth. Pull your latest 401k statement this week. Find the expense ratios on every fund you hold. If anything is above 0.5%, ask why, or move to a lower-cost equivalent index fund. Action Step 5. Think in decades, not quarters. The master artisans of Deir el-Medina spent their entire careers, sometimes 40 years, contributing to a single collective project, the eternal wealth of the Pharaohs' afterlife. They thought in generational timescales. The average American checks their brokerage account 8 times a week, according to a 2022 Betterment survey, and panic sells during every correction. The Egyptians would find this baffling. Set your 401k and index fund contributions to automatic. Review once per quarter. Think in decades. The S&P 500 has returned an average of 10.7% annually since 1957. The strategy works, if you let it. 3,000 years ago, a group of craftsmen in the Egyptian desert built a financial system so fundamentally sound that Wall Street reverse-engineered it and sold it back to you with a management fee attached. They understood surplus, diversification, deferred compensation, mutual aid, and contract enforcement, without a single spreadsheet or smartphone. The question is not whether ancient wisdom works. The question is whether you will use it. Now I want to hear from you. Which ancient civilization should we excavate next? The Romans, who built the world's first central bank. The Mesopotamians, who invented compound interest in 2000 BC. Or the Venetians, who pioneered the first government bonds? Drop your answer in the comments right now. The top answer becomes our next episode. If this video changed how you think about money, subscribe to Wealth of Ages. We publish every week, and every single episode will make you richer and smarter. Hit the bell. The ancients built empires one smart decision at a time. So can you.